Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Daily Fix. I am your usual host and presenter, Advocate Tulo Hoyane. This morning I want to look at Advocate Mnisi's no-show on the last sitting day of the court on Friday. Why was Mnisi absent? Let me just put that in perspective by beginning with what happened last week. Last week we heard that there was a security threat in the Pretoria High Court. Apparently there was information that was in the possession of the police, that some of the accused, acting hand in glove with some of the defense counsels, were engaged in a conspiracy to murder. And who was the intended victim? It was the state, Baloyi, and possibly his junior too, and perhaps the court. That was a serious matter. We saw those 3 gentlemen whisked out of the court last week after the security threat had come to the fore. Shortly thereafter, we then heard that there was this conspiracy and it extended to the defense counsels. That was the first leg of the narrative. Now, following that, the focus now shifted away from the threat to the state or the threats to the state and move on to Advocate Mnisi. The focus then shifted to Advocate Mnisi because, among other things, there is talk that Advocate Mnisi is in the habit of involving himself in things which are none of his business. And Mnisi was visibly angry, and he told the court in no uncertain terms that he did not take those threats and allegations lightly, and that they had affected him, perhaps both physically and psychologically. I don't think Judge Ratha took that seriously. He simply did not seem to be too interested in what Mnisi was telling him. So that was the situation, or that is how the situation developed last week. Now, all of a sudden we see Advocate Mnisi not turning up on the day on which we expected Judge Ratha Mokhateng to deliver the judgment or the ruling that he has simply refused to deliver. Judge Ratha Mokhateng, you'll recall, has just looked away from making that ruling as to whether George Baloyi, the prosecutor, had proved the statement of Gwabeni. That was the expectation last week when the court adjourned to January 19th, and that did not happen. And following that, or on that day, on the last sitting of the court, Advocate Mnisi just simply did not show up. Now, what can we read into all this? By the look of things, if there's a case of conspiracy to murder, court officials, and you must here recall that the focus is on Advocate Mnisi, and perhaps to a much lesser extent, Advocate Numa. And why is the focus on Advocate Mnisi so much relative to perhaps the others? Advocate Mnisi has been pivotal in this case. He has consistently had run-ins with the court over a lot of irregularities, such that his relationship with Judge Rathamokgwateng has reached an all-time low. But true to form, Mnisi has always challenged some of the controversial decisions that we have seen Judge Ratha take. So when the defense case opened, it was Advocate Mnisi who had the first bite. He called Absalom Zungu, that bombshell of a Zulu man who came before that court bold enough, and at times who at times even went as far as telling the court itself that it was being unfair or was biased. But he later on apologized, but the man had made his point. So Advocate Charles Mnisi brought forward Absalom Zungu, who has just shaken that court. You see, with the arrival of Absalom Zungu on the scene, the focus of that case has now shifted. People are now saying to themselves, are these the right people that we are seeing before the Pretoria High Court in the light of this fabricated evidence that is being exposed before the court? So that was Absalom Zungu. By the time Absalom Zungu had finished, the prosecution was reeling from those blows that he had delivered. And no sooner had Absalom Zungu finished, we then saw Kwabeni come along. Kwabeni has simply flattened the prosecution case. He told the court that, people like Gininda had been involved in assaults, and that his signature had been, and the statement that he was supposed to have deposed to and affixed his signature to was a false statement. Again, turning the prosecution case on its head, following closely on the back of what Absalom Zungu had testified to. So the focus of this case now is really on the prosecution. If the prosecution had a case against the 5 accused persons, the question you can ask yourself is, why come up with fabricated evidence to achieve that objective? And my take is that they can only come up with fabricated evidence in view of the fact that, in fact, they have no evidence against the 5 accused persons sitting in the dock. That is why they have to resort to these tactics. But back to Mnisi again. Mnisi, I suppose, is not feeling well. But above all, Mnisi did not show up in court because of those threats that had been made. That is simply why Mnisi did not turn up in court on the last day of the court sitting. Because you see, in this trial, you cannot take anything lightly. People have been murdered in this trial. Lawyers have been arrested in this trial, right in court. Remember Malesela Tefo? So a lot of things have happened. And this was the day on which we had expected the court to deliver a ruling in favor of the defense. Not that we carry any favor with the defense, but that was a natural expectation from our understanding of the law. And had the court ruled in the defense's favor, that would have had the spin-off, or the fallout would have been that, the threat level against Mnisi would have gone up. It would have simply gone up. So Mnisi is being intimidated now. That is my take on what is happening here. He is being targeted as the lead man in the defense team who is taking the fight to the prosecution. He is the man who is, dismantling piece by piece the prosecution case. And somebody somewhere is not happy with Mnisi. Having said that, let me thank you for watching this video. Let me thank you for all the views, subscriptions, likes, and shares that I'm seeing. And have a wonderful, wonderful Sunday. Thank you.